The deepest wounds are inflicted by those for whom we sacrificed everything, and if you really want to understand how I came to take back what rightfully belonged to me, you must first find out that I tried my best, with all the cells of my soul to be that woman for them. Who is always there, always supportive, always forgiving, even when forgiving seemed like a betrayal of oneself, because at some point motherhood ceases to be a choice. It becomes a chain that you wear proudly until it begins to suffocate. I have spent 58 years of my life giving away pieces of myself, not figuratively, but in the truest sense of the word, my days, my strength, my dreams, even my health so that they, my children, would feel safe, loved, needed. And all this is only to receive an email one day, cold, official, written as if I am not a mother, but a former accountant who forgot to submit a report on time. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. It was a Tuesday morning in April, and the heat in the lawn was unnatural, almost insolent for spring, and the sun was reflected in the glass with such blinding certainty, as if to remind you that light exists even when you only feel darkness. I was sitting at the kitchen island, slowly, almost listlessly, stirring a spoonful of coffee that was already cold, but I still didn't dare get up and make a new one. Through the window, I saw my neighbor Giuseppe watering his hydrangeas with fanatical attention, as if these flowers were the truth of life, and suddenly my iPad, lying next to me, beeped softly, and I immediately noticed the name of my daughter, Sylvia, highlighted in bold. I smiled. Yes, despite everything, I smiled, because a mother's heart is never the first to give up. Tension had been building up between us lately, arguments, innuendos, disagreements about her wedding, the groom, whom I instinctively did not accept, but told myself, this stress, the usual pre-wedding chaos, will pass. I opened the letter. Mom, it began, not dear or beloved Mom, but just Mom, as if it were an appeal in an electricity bill. We completed the formation of the guest list for the Paris ceremony, and it went on, and I felt something inside me begin to slowly but inevitably freeze away. After discussing with Gabriel and his family, we decided that it would be better if he joined us via a live stream rather than in person. I reread this sentence twice, and then again. The words seemed unwilling to enter my mind, bouncing off like pebbles from armor. Gabriel's mother believes that the ceremony should be intimate, and we want to respect her opinion. I stared at the screen, at the smooth, precise wording, as if someone had decided to delete me from my daughter's life with the same composure as an accountant deletes a non-existent row from a spreadsheet. The next paragraph was technical, how they set up a private channel, how I could watch the broadcast from the comfort of my home, and, to top it all off, if you want to be a part of the event, you can watch the ceremony via Google Earth. I can't laugh. She wrote it, at the end, in caps. LOL. Yes, LOL, it's like it's all a joke, a practical joke, a ridiculous joke in which I'm a laughing stock. I felt the air in the kitchen become heavy, as if the walls were shrinking, and something in my chest was breaking not with a sound, but with a quiet, dull, inescapable click. But my hands weren't shaking. And my eyes remained dry. It wasn't pain, it was understanding. I wrote back, of course, enjoy this momentous day. 4 words. No emotions. No explanation. No fighting. Only a silent acceptance that sounded louder than any hysteria. I knew she couldn't ignore it. Sylvia always needed a reaction, a scream, a rebuke, tears, something that could be presented as proof of my guilt. And I didn't give her that luxury. The phone rang almost immediately, her name flashed on the screen, and I didn't hesitate to put it face down, like putting an end to a letter that no one will read. I finished my coffee, rinsed the cup, got dressed and left for work. Just like any other day. As if nothing had happened. I have been working at Caldwell and Burn for 18 years now, as an office manager, an inconspicuous link, without which even the most brilliant legal mechanisms fall apart. Managing partner Robert Landolfi has always been able to see what is hidden most deeply, behind a smile, behind the phrase everything is fine, behind fresh lipstick and a neat hairstyle. Alessia, you look like you've seen a ghost, he said when I walked in, and his voice sounded like he really knew that I'd just been through more than just a morning disappointment. I adjusted the papers in my hands and forced myself to smile, as if the slight tension in my temples and that telltale tiredness under my eyes were just the result of an anxious dream, and not a crack somewhere in my chest that had become too noticeable to be ignored. I just didn't sleep well, that's all, I told myself and Robert, trying to sound casual, matter of fact, as if I were still the same Alessia he'd known for almost 2 decades, punctual, restrained, reliable. He didn't insist, although a shadow of concern flashed in his eyes, and I felt an unpleasant tremor inside. I didn't want anyone to see my pain, especially him, a man who was used to seeing me as a support, not a source of worry. However, an hour later, he returned with a paper latte cup from the cafe downstairs, placed it next to my computer and, without saying a word, gently touched my shoulder, and this simple touch, in which there was neither sympathy nor pity, but only a quiet, unobtrusive presence, turned out to be the first manifestation of sincere kindness. The feeling I've felt for months. I almost burst into tears. By lunchtime, my phone was ablaze with notifications. Sylvia had called 12 times and left 8 voice messages, each of which was probably another round of her habitual emotional manipulation. I listened to one. Her voice sounded in it, dry, tense, with that sharp intonation that she invariably used when she realized that she could not achieve her goal by conventional means. "Mom, pick up the phone. It's not funny. We need to talk about this," she said. "Not please, not I'm sorry, don't let's discuss. Only orders, only demands." I deleted the message without flinching, just like the other 7, because I knew that any involvement I had would fuel her power over me. And I was no longer going to be her convenient emotional target. At 5 o'clock, as if guided by an inner compass, I went to the bank. I knew exactly what I needed, and I knew I wouldn't put it off any longer. At the branch, I was met by Carlos, the manager with whom I kept all my accounts, a polite, reserved man, and in a sense, one of the few who always treated me with the respect that I had not felt from my own children for a long time. "Mrs. Morani, it's always a pleasure to see you," he said with a slight smile and motioned for her to enter the office. "How can I help you today?" I sat down, straightened my skirt on my knees, straightened my back and, looking him straight in the eye, said, "I need to cancel the bank transfer." His eyebrows arched, and a slight puzzlement appeared on his face. "The one going to France? For your daughter's wedding?" He clarified, as if he hoped that I meant something else. "Yes, that's the one." "May I ask why?" "I must warn you, there may be cancellation fees." "I'll pay the fees," I said, and was surprised at how firm and clear my voice sounded. "Circumstances have changed." Carlos nodded, without asking any more questions, turned to his computer and started typing something. "The good news is that the payment has not been processed yet." "You noticed it in time," he said, looking at me over the top of his glasses. "Are you sure, Mrs. Morani? $50,000 is a substantial sum." 50,000, yes. That's how much I intended to transfer to Sylvia as an additional wedding gift, in addition to the 30,000 that she already had in her account. $80,000 for a party I wasn't invited to. When I returned home, the sun was already sinking towards the horizon, and the first coolness of the evening was felt in the air. The phone screen showed 3 new missed calls from Sylvia and 1 from Durant. So she's called in backup. Her brother had to convince me that, as always, I was exaggerating, that I was being dramatic, that we just needed to talk. I turned off my phone, took a bottle of Merlot from the shelf, which I had been saving for a special occasion for a long time, and thought that now it might be time. I poured wine into a glass and went out into the backyard, where dusk had already fallen on the flower beds, on a bench under an old acacia tree, on the garden path where my children used to run. I sat alone, staring into the gathering gloom, and thought about how it happened that my whole life had come down to the fact that I was an unwanted guest at a party that I helped arrange. I thought about those endless hours of overworking when, after my divorce from their father, I dragged out the house, the bills, and their dreams. About how she paid for her education, pulling money out of the pension fund. How I held Sylvia's hand when she had a miscarriage. How she hugged her in the sleepless nights when she left work, crying. How she helped her move, change her home, change herself. How I paid the down payment on Durant's house. I did everything right. Everything that society demands from a mother. Everything that conscience requires. And at the same time, I found myself alone. On the terrace. With a glass of wine. Not invited. Unnecessary. My thoughts drifted to Victoria, Robert's wife, who died 3 years ago. I helped with the funeral, called agencies, ordered flowers, made sure that the house had everything you need for people who came to say goodbye. I remember Robert holding my hand, squeezing it unexpectedly tightly, and saying softly, "Alessia, I do not know what I would do without you." It wasn't a confession, it was gratitude, and it meant more than 1,000 empty words from my children. Because he saw me. For real. Appreciated it. And when was the last time Sylvia looked at me like that, as a person and not as a function? The bottle was half empty when the doorbell rang. I didn't want to open it. My whole inner world was asking for silence, solitude, and a pause. But something, barely perceptible, prompted answer. Maybe she is, after all. Maybe she came to apologize. I got up, went to the door, turned the key and slowly opened it. Durant, my son, stood on the threshold, confused, slightly disheveled, dressed in his casual business suit, which at that moment seemed to fit him awkwardly, as if out of size, because there was uncertainty in his eyes, like a boy who was caught off guard in the world of adult decisions. He came straight from work at his marketing firm, looking like he hadn't had time to exhale or change clothes, as if he'd been transported straight from another meeting to my doorstep without having time to rethink why, and not particularly wanting me to ask unnecessary questions. "Mom," he called over his shoulder, already walking down the hallway to the back of the house, without waiting for either my invitation or a simple greeting, "why aren't you answering your phone?" Nat is in a panic. I closed the door behind him and, somehow mechanically straightening my hair, followed him into the living room, where I already felt the familiar tension growing by the minute, as if the old melody of our family disagreements was playing in the air. "Hello to you, too, Durant," I said, trying to put at least a shadow of irony into the words, although my chest was already aching with a premonition of how this visit would end. He turned to me, forcefully running his hand through his dark, slightly disheveled hair, the color of a faded chestnut, just like they were in my youth, before they were covered with the silver frost of years. "What's happening? What is it?" he asked, and his voice was not concerned, not sympathetic, but rather reproachful, as if I had caused a small family crisis just out of boredom. "Nat says you're not coming to the wedding right now." "I wasn't invited to the wedding," I corrected him, putting the accents clearly, because those subtleties were the whole point. "She says you're being difficult because of the whole live broadcast thing," he continued, and I couldn't help but laugh harsh, dry, and louder than I'd expected. "Right. Live broadcast. Great. Where I, the mother of the bride, have to sit at home and watch my daughter get married, through a screen, because her future mother-in-law believes that my presence violates intimacy." Durant shifted his weight from one foot to the other, as if the floor had suddenly become uncomfortable, and his business suit began to squeeze his shoulders. "It's complicated, Mom. Gabriel's family, they're very traditional. And they pay most of the expenses." I felt my eyebrows arch in mute amazement. "Are they paying? Really?" I asked and took a step forward, approaching him to the distance where every word becomes a blow. "Because I've already transferred $30,000. And I was going to send another 50 until I received a letter, which, by the way, very clearly states that I am not welcome." He paused. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I was trying to add up the amount in my head, 50,000. I could see how that figure cut through his calmness. 50,000. Jesus, Mom. That's a lot of money. Yes, Durant, it's really a lot of money. The money I earn not from lunch with investors, but from overtime. Money that I didn't spend on myself, neither on trips, nor on restaurants, nor on trying to believe in love again after your father left us for a young secretary. I've been saving them for you. For her. I went to the bar and poured myself another glass of wine. I didn't offer him anything, and I wasn't going to. "Don't worry. I canceled the transfer," I said, and my voice was quieter than usual, but every sentence seemed to cut into the space between us. What are you doing?" He cried out, unable to believe it. "Mom, they're counting on this money. Deposit for the place, catering, decor, everything is already ordered." I sipped my wine slowly and looked at him with an almost icy calm. "It's not my problem anymore." "Of course, this is your problem." He was shouting now. "She's your daughter." "And I'm her mother," I said softly, but there was more pain in that silence than in his entire scream. A mother who was considered superfluous. The mother who was asked not to come. The mother for whom the broadcast was left. He ran both hands through his hair, a familiar gesture inherited from his teenage years, and as usual, he got confused in this movement, as if he wanted to regain control. "It's just like you, Mom. You always take care of yourself." And that's when, right then, something in me snapped. Not dramatically, not with a flash, just like a thread that has been hung with heavy stones for too long. "Get out of my house," I said, clearly and without trembling. He blinked, not immediately believing what he had heard. "What?" "You heard me. Get out." "Mom, come on, no. I've devoted my entire adult life to making sure that you and Sylvia have everything. I was working 2 jobs when your father decided that his new family was more important than the old one. I paid for college, helped with the mortgage. I didn't live for myself, but for you. And now you're standing in my house and saying that I'm doing this about myself? No. Go away." He looked at me for a long time, and I saw a whole gamut flash across his face, from confusion to a slight, almost imperceptible shadow of respect. Then he turned around, stepped to the door and left, closing it behind him with a quiet, extremely polite click that, oddly enough, pierced me more sharply than if he had slammed it shut. I stood in the living room for a long time, feeling my heart pounding in my chest, not in time with anxiety, but with liberation. It wasn't like me. I've always been the one who smooths things out, who reconciles, who keeps quiet so as not to hurt anyone. But when I picked up the glass of wine again, my hands were calm. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. My phone flashed on the coffee table again. Sylvia. Her face smiled at me from the screen, the same photo from her 30th birthday, when everything still seemed possible, before Gabriel, before France, before the break. I pressed the power button and watched as the screen went blank, as her face disappeared, as her voice disappeared. Tomorrow there will be consequences, conversations, attempts to return, explain, blame. But tonight belonged to me. And I intended to live it. The morning brought no relief, no clarity, no peace, or even the opportunity to exhale briefly. Only 43 missed calls and a whole series of text messages, in which an alarming change of key was increasingly felt, from confident pressure and commanding tone to bargaining, irritation, and then to panic, so frank and raw that I even felt a little sorry for the little girl that Sylvia used to be, with her hair always disheveled, with big eyes, believing that her mother would always fix everything. I flipped through these messages, standing by the kitchen stove while the espresso machine hummed steadily, filling the air with the smell of roasted grains, and I caught myself thinking that watching this digital meltdown now seemed almost like a theater where actors read other people's lines. "Mom, we need to talk, 7:05 p.m. Why don't you answer?" "It's childish, 8:32. The restaurant called. They said that the payment failed, 9:17. Please call me back. It's not funny anymore, 10:43. Mom, we'll lose everything if we don't pay by tomorrow. Gabriel's parents won't cover all the expenses, 12:01. And the last one, which was brief and condensed into one phrase, came at 3:24 a.m. "I don't understand why you're doing this to me." I smiled into the mug, carefully bringing it to my lips, enjoying the first sip of strong coffee, which burned the palate and calmed at the same time. Of course, she didn't understand. And I couldn't figure it out. All her life, Sylvia received from me time, attention, money, care, forgiveness, patience, second chances, without asking where it came from, without thinking that a woman was behind it all, tired, exhausted, but continued to give. That had to change. Now. When I was getting dressed for work, Choosing a dark blue jacket that hid the fatigue under my eyes, the phone rang again. This time the number was French, not saved in contacts, but intuition told me it was him, Gabriel. I declined the call without hesitation and, taking my bag, left the house. At the office, when I opened my corporate email, there was already a letter from Sylvia waiting in my personal mailbox. The subject line read, "Please don't ruin my wedding," and after lingering on this headline a little longer than I intended, I nevertheless opened the letter with a certain cold curiosity to see what move would be next in this strange family game. "Mom, I know you're upset about the live broadcast situation," it began, "but this is an extreme. We lost the deposit for the place, and if we don't pay the balance by the end of the day, Paris time, we will lose the catering service. Gabriel's parents are furious and say that this proves that they were right about you from the very beginning. Please don't do this to us. We can talk about your presence at the wedding, but first we need this money. That's all. No apologies, no admission of guilt, no emotional revelation. Just a condition. My right to be at my own daughter's wedding is a bargaining chip dependent on my bank transfer." I closed the letter without answering, and with concentrated persistence, I switched to the real estate contract that I had been putting off for a week, paragraph by paragraph, as if this was the only way to return to reality. By noon, Robert Landolfi came to my table, and as always, there was no fuss in his manner, just restrained energy and benevolence, which never seemed artificial. "Lunch? What is it?" he asked, pointing to the window behind which the city was roaring, and added, "That new Italian restaurant across the street, they say they have great gnocchi." Normally, I would have refused, saying it was urgent, busy, or tired. But today, something inside said enough is enough. Maybe it was the events of the last day, or maybe it was the slight warmth in his voice that I missed so much. "I'd like that," I replied, and there was an unexpected relief in my voice that surprised me. Over pasta, he talked about weekends with his grandchildren, how difficult it is to entertain, protect, and not forget about yourself at the same time. Exhausting, he admitted, but wonderful. Everything in my life seems more meaningful now. Since Victoria died, it's like I've been living for the two of us. I looked at him, and there was no regret in his eyes, but the bright fullness of loss that gives rise to gratitude for every new day. "That's great," I said, meaning not only his words, but the very possibility of hearing them. He put down his fork and looked at me carefully. "Alessia, I'm sorry to say this, but you're different today. Easier." Normally, I would have laughed it off, turned the conversation aside, changed the subject. But not today. I didn't feel like hiding today. I told him the truth. About Sylvia, about the wedding, about the letter, about the fact that I was asked to stay at home, without explanation, without respect. She told me how I canceled the transfer. And now they're frantically trying to get something back. Robert whistled softly. "That's a pretty big statement," he said, and there was no condemnation in his voice, just respect and maybe even hidden admiration. Then he asked, "What does it feel like?" The question caught me off guard. No one has ever asked me about it. Always, "What are you going to do? How will you solve the problem? How can you help?" But never, "How do you feel?" I was silent for a long time, choosing the right word. He nodded slowly, and in his gaze there was that rare, honest understanding that does not require words, does not require clarification, because everything in this gesture, agreement, sympathy, support, was expressed without theatricality, without an attempt to correct or embellish. "Sometimes we really have to set boundaries," he said, even, and perhaps especially, with those we love the most. He reached across the table and briefly but firmly squeezed my hand, not like a man, not like a boss, but like a man who knows that kindness can be the only answer in a world full of understatements. "Anyway, I think you're doing the right thing," he added. And at that moment, I suddenly realized that just such simple, warm words can be much more powerful than any excuse. When I returned to the office, notifications were flashing on the phone screen again, 3 missed calls and a message from Durant. "Sylvia is hysterical. Please call her back." I read it, put the phone screen down and purposefully returned to work, allowing myself to fully immerse myself in business, because paperwork, contracts, numbers do not shout, do not blackmail, do not ask for explanations. It wasn't until the evening, when I was on my way home, that I allowed myself to start thinking, carefully, slowly, as if touching a wound. The deadline for paying for catering has long passed. Sylvia and Gabriel were most likely calling everyone, frantically trying to find a replacement, looking for words to explain themselves, coming up with excuses, and maybe even in desperation asking Gabriel's parents to add more money to patch up the hole. And perhaps it was a cruel thought, but despite the tiny, deeply hidden maternal feeling of pain from her suffering, the rest of me, the one that had been silent for years, the one that I had been strangling day after day, felt a cold, scorched satisfaction. I was no longer a victim. The house was dark when I arrived, and the usual silence greeted me, but a figure was sitting on the porch in the semi-darkness. As I got closer, I made out familiar features. Sophia, Sylvia's best friend since childhood, the same girl who used to spend hours chatting with her in my basement, giggling, falling asleep in pajamas with pink bunnies. "Mrs. Marani," she said, rising as I approached. "I'm sorry for being so sudden." "It's okay, Sophia," I replied, unlocking the door and motioning for her to enter. "Would you like some tea?" She nodded, and we went into the kitchen, where I habitually filled the kettle, put it on the stove, and all the while I felt her gaze on me, attentive, intense, but not hostile. "Did Sylvia send you?" I finally asked, not bothering with circumlocutions, because I was tired of diplomacy. Sophia sighed, sitting down on a high chair at the bar. "She's a mess, Mrs. Marani. The venue has gone to others. They are trying to find a new one. Everything is falling apart. Gabriel's parents are talking about canceling the entire wedding." "It sounds intense," I replied evenly, taking the tea bags and arranging them in mugs. "That's right," she confirmed, and added, a little more gently, "Look, I understand it's hurting you. When they tell you that you have to watch your daughter's wedding online, it's terrible. But do you really want things to be like this between you? Do you want to ruin your relationship forever?" The kettle whistled, and I slowly poured boiling water over the mugs, allowing myself a moment of silence. "What kind of relationship, Sophia?" I finally asked, turning around. "The ones where I give and she takes? The ones where I'm good while I'm paying for a dress, but I'm not worthy to be around when she gets married? It's not a relationship. This is a one-sided deal." "She made a mistake," Sophia insisted softly. "A big one, I know. But she loves you." I handed her a mug and, looking into her eyes, said softly, "Does she love? Or does she love what I can do for her? Because, for my part, it's not the same thing." Sophia wrapped her hands around the mug, and suddenly there was something childish and fragile in her face, like when she was that girl in pajamas. "What can I tell her? Is there anything that could change your mind?" I thought about it. Deeply, sincerely. I checked myself. Could Sylvia have done or said something that would melt the ice that I had finally allowed myself to grow? "No," I said after a long pause. "Nothing. Not even to apologize?" Her voice became quieter. I shook my head. "Words are easy, Sophia. Especially when there's money at stake." I took a sip of tea. Sylvia has made her choice. Now she has to live with him, just like I had to live with mine. After Sophia left, I sat in the kitchen for a long time, and silence became my ally again. I thought about the choice, about the boundaries, about how we teach others how to treat us, not with words, not with screams, but with patience, refusals, and the decision not to be comfortable anymore. It was in that silence that my phone vibrated again. Sylvia. I held it up to my ear and, this time, answered. "Mom." Her voice was hoarse, broken, and filled with panic. "Finally, please, you have to help us. Everything is falling apart. The venue is gone. The catering has refused. Gabriel's parents are threatening to withdraw altogether." "Hi, Sylvia," I said calmly, without raising my voice, as if this was not about the collapse of a carefully planned event, but about some ordinary telephone conversation between two people separated by time, decisions, and decades of understatement. "Did you hear what I said?" We're losing everything, she exclaimed, and in her voice, despite her despair, there was the same no note of accusation, as if I had deliberately, pettily, and stubbornly destroyed her life, and not because she herself had once cut me out of it. And all because you're being petty about the live broadcast, she continued, with emphasis on every word, as if it was all nonsense, a temporary misunderstanding that I could fix at the touch of a button. I let her words hang in the air, feeling them sink in and, finding no response, just dissipate like dust. I heard you, I finally said. Well, can you help me? Will you send the money? For the first time in the entire conversation, there was real hope in her voice, as if she had just realized that I could really say no. No, I replied. I said I wouldn't. There was silence on the line, and then a sharp, strained intake of breath, like a man who suddenly found himself without air. What? What is it? She whispered. I said no, Sylvia. The money stays where it is. But why? It's about personal presence, right? Okay, you can come over. We'll figure something out with Gabriel's family. Please, just send the money, she said, hurrying, panting, as if afraid that I would cut her off again. I closed my eyes. That's it. That's what I've been waiting for. A concession made in exchange for something tangible, not out of love, not out of remorse, not because she realized how much she had hurt. A concession that I might have accepted yesterday. But not today. Because I'm different today. It's too late, I said calmly. Too late. It's not too late. Mom, please. We're talking about my wedding. Yes, I replied. About your wedding. The one you didn't want me to come to until you needed my money. She started crying. Loudly. Without restraint. Those sobs that once caused me a convulsive need to hug, comfort, correct. But not now. What do I do now? What is it? She asked, sobbing. And for the first time in her life, I didn't offer a solution. She did not save, did not prompt, did not pave the way. That, I said softly, is entirely up to you. I ended the call without waiting for an answer, and without hesitation, I turned off the phone. Tomorrow will bring more. More tears, more letters, more requests, and possibly accusations. But today, in the silence of my kitchen, under the light of a lamp reflected in a glass of cold tea, I felt the woman I once left alive under the rubble of the role that defined my entire adult life, the role of a mother. A woman who was strong, determined, and no longer ready to be the last on her own list of priorities. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm went off, and my chest was quiet, steady, and calm. No anxious thoughts, no guilt, no tightness in the temples. I made coffee and went out onto the terrace, wrapped in a light blanket, watching the neighborhood wake up. Across the street, Miss Chen was walking her poodle, as she did every morning, exactly on schedule. Sullivan's children were waiting for the school bus, and their backpacks seemed almost the same size as themselves. The world continued to live. And my life has changed. My phone remained turned off. I knew what I would find there if I turned it on, a flood of notifications, pleas, probably anger, accusations, speculation. But I wasn't ready to face it all yet. Instead, I arrived at work early, enjoyed the first few minutes of silence in the office, and immersed myself in the routine of scheduling meetings, proofreading briefings, and filing documents. Simple tasks. Understandable. Unlike motherhood, they had instructions. Around 10 o'clock, Robert appeared in the doorway. Just checking, he said with the same expression of sympathetic interest that never seemed intrusive. How are you holding up? Okay, I answered automatically, and then, after a moment's thought, I added, actually. I don't know. It's a strange feeling. I feel terrible and liberated at the same time. He nodded. It makes sense. The first steps to self-esteem are often like this. Painful ones. But necessary. He was silent for a moment, and then asked, Have you heard anything from Sylvia? I turned off my phone, I said. His eyebrows rose slightly. I need some space, I explained. Stay firm in your decision, he said. But, when you turn your phone back on, be ready. I looked at him questioningly. Maybe I heard something from my daughter. She is friends with Sophia on social media. My stomach lurched. What's going on? It looks like Sylvia posted something last night. About me? He looked uncomfortable. That was not very flattering. I felt my face heat up. What did she say? I didn't see it myself, only by words. It was a long tirade about how you ruined her wedding because you're jealous of her happiness, because you always take care of yourself. He grimaced. There were a lot of comments in her support. I felt a pang. Yes, it hurt. But not like before. Not destructive. Not to the point of losing yourself. Of course they were, I said calmly. She always played the victim role well. Robert paused. Anyway, my daughter sided with you. She said it was incredibly tasteless to blame your own mother on the internet, especially if she was financing your life. I didn't immediately find what to say. But then I managed to smile. Please, thank her for me. After Robert left, and the door of his office slammed shut behind him, I remained sitting at my desk, staring at an empty computer screen, which reflected not lines of reports, graphs, or numbers, but my thoughts, confused, prickly, irritated, like strands of hair clenched in the palm of my hand after a long time. Sleepless sleep. So, Sylvia brought our personal conflict to the public, stripping it to the bone, leaving in it only the interpretation that is beneficial to her, without context, without understanding, without trying to put herself in my shoes for even a second. It was all too familiar, painfully recognizable. Whenever she felt cornered, she called for help from outsiders, looking for an external arbitrator, a collective judge who would confirm, she's right, but I'm wrong. As a teenager, she complained to her friends' parents about my unfair rules, putting on the table only those facts that could make me look domineering and overly strict. At university, she posted cryptic posts on social media, full of innuendos, but transparent enough for subscribers to conclude that her mother did not understand, did not support, did not care as she should. But this was different. These were no longer hints. It was a direct attack. Conscious. Calculated. Designed to shame me, to put me in a false light, and to force me to comply. I turned on my phone again, which had been silent at the bottom of my bag all this time, and it immediately vibrated in my hand, as if it had come to life. 27 new messages, 14 missed calls, 5 voice messages. I didn't open any of them, but immediately logged into Facebook, and, of course, Sylvia's post was at the top of the feed. Hundreds of likes, reposts, comments. She knew how to gather attention, how to choose the moment, how to tap into the sore points. To all those who have asked about news related to the wedding, she wrote, "It is with a broken heart that I must inform you that Gabriel and I are trying our best to save the situation. My mother decided to stop the financial support she had promised us earlier. That's because she's upset that she won't be able to attend the ceremony physically, even though we've arranged for her to watch it live. She's known about these plans for months, but she waited until the last minute to pull the stunt, which caused us to lose the venue and possibly more. I am in despair that the person who should love me unconditionally has ruined the most important day of my life out of pure spite." The comments, as expected, were filled with one-sided, formulaic phrases. "Oh my God, this is terrible. Mothers have to support their children no matter what. How can you be so selfish? I'm so sorry that you have to go through this. Who does this to their daughter?" I flipped through them, feeling a strange, almost bodily detachment, as if this was happening to someone else. Until one comment made me stop. Wait, you didn't invite your mom to the wedding and still expected her to pay for everything? Something's not right here. Sylvia answered almost immediately, with lightning speed, as if she was standing guard over her own narrative. She wasn't uninvited. The ceremony is very intimate because of Gabriel's cultural traditions. It was always planned to include her in the broadcast, and she agreed to it a few months ago. Another commentator joined in. "It's still strange to take money from someone and not let them attend the event itself." Sylvia again, "You don't understand the situation. Please don't judge without knowing all the facts. I put down my phone, suddenly tired of this endless dance in public. Sylvia wasn't just creating an alternative reality, she believed in it, defended it with a zeal capable of stifling any attempt at dialogue. She distorted the truth, reshaped it for herself, exposing herself as a rational victim, rejecting everything that could cast doubt on her words. I spent so many years accepting her version of the world, so often doubting my own feelings and perceptions if they didn't match hers. But never again. I picked up the phone and dialed Durant's number. He answered immediately, as if he had been waiting. Mom, finally. Did you see what Sylvia posted? Everything is getting out of control. I saw it, I replied. And that's why I'm calling. I want you to tell me the truth about one thing. What? He was wary. Did you know that I wouldn't be invited to the wedding even before I received that letter? There was a pause. Awkward, tense, like a crack in glass, barely noticeable, but fatal. Durant? I prompted. He sighed. Yes, I knew. She told me about it a couple of weeks ago when we were having lunch. And you didn't think to tell me? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, but the steel in it was palpable. She said she's working on how to tell you. That he wants to find the right words, the right way to explain. I was silent. I'm too tired to scream. Too clear to doubt again. He knew. And he was silent. And I paid. For the silence, for the convenience, for their comfort, over and over again. I laughed, but there wasn't the slightest hint of amusement in it. There wasn't even bitterness, just a dry, almost hoarse exhalation from my chest, which for a moment felt too tight from the absurdity of the situation, from the absurdity of trying to explain that there was a correct way to tell my mother that she wasn't expected at the wedding, while as her money, on the contrary, was more than welcome. Is this the right way to explain that I wasn't invited, but my bank account was at the top of the guest list? I asked, not bothering to disguise my resentment. Mom, it's not that simple, he began, and I already knew where he was going. Gabriel's mother is very traditional. She wanted only close relatives to attend the ceremony. Who do you think I am? I interrupted. Do you realize how absurd that sounds? I am the next of kin. I am the mother of the bride. He paused. Well, godparents, aunts, his grandmother, they have their own traditions, and they're kind of close too. Were you invited? I asked, slowly, with emphasis on each word. He hesitated, which gave him away. You were, weren't you? I pushed because I wasn't going to go around the rough edges anymore. Yes, he finally exhaled, I was invited. But this is different. I communicate well with Gabriel, and his mother adores me. That's enough, I said, and my voice sounded colder than I expected. Just stop. It's all clear to me. Very clear. And indeed, at that moment, the picture finally took shape. I was comfortable while I was giving, while I was silent, while I was paying. But as soon as I stopped, my value evaporated. My son knew that I was expelled, and he didn't say anything. My daughter lied publicly, accusing me of being selfish. Mom, please don't bring it to this, he said pleadingly. Sylvia is in a terrible state. The wedding breaks down. Gabriel's parents are already saying that he shouldn't marry a girl from such a dysfunctional family. Do you want me to help her? I asked again. No, I said clearly. I won't. I'm done, Durant. I'm tired of being an ATM, tired of being the only adult, tired of being guilty for existing. So you're going to let her ruin the wedding? His voice was trembling with tension. What kind of mother would do that? The one who finally realized her worth, I replied calmly. Tell your sister to delete her post. There are too many lies in it. And you know it. And if it doesn't? What is it? He challenged. Then I'll tell you my version. In detail. Every detail, I said, and before he could respond, I ended the call, putting the phone down on the table with a firmness I'd never felt before with my own children. I went back to work. My fingers confidently ran over the keys, and there was no hesitation or anxiety in my actions anymore. The Alessia who would have trembled from these conversations, afraid of hurting the children's feelings, afraid that she would not be understood, has already disappeared. In her place was a woman who gave birth to pain. At lunch, in the silence of my office, I thought about Victoria, Robert's wife, whom I always considered a model of inner strength. Wise, kind, but never losing her self-respect. Inwardly, I could almost hear her voice, "Stand your ground, Alessia. Some lessons come only through pain." My phone vibrated. Message from Durant: "The post has been deleted. Sylvia wants to talk to you." I answered simply, "I'm at work. I'll call you tonight." The answer came almost instantly. "She says it can't wait. They need to make decisions today." I put my phone in my bag. Their urgency was no longer my urgency. I didn't live by their watch anymore. When I left the office, the sun was already setting, painting the sky in rich shades of fiery orange and deep purple, and I drove home with the windows open, letting the spring air wash over my face like water after a long dive. There was still a heaviness in my chest, the heaviness of motherhood, love, affection, disappointments, and hopes that I had been carrying around for a long time. But under this weight, somewhere deep down, something else began to spread its wings, light, almost invisible, but persistent. I was just finishing dinner, cutting bread and pouring soup, when the doorbell rang. Not fast, impatient, but long, persistent, with that special character that always says, "I'm not leaving until you open up." I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel, walked slowly to the door, peered through the peephole, and saw Gabriel. He stood on my porch, tense, like a man preparing for a confrontation but not knowing where to start. I could have ignored him. Pretend that I'm not there. But that would be an escape. But I'm not running. Never again. Whatever happens, I will face it. I opened the door without holding my breath or feeling anger or fear, just a steady, detached curiosity, and when I saw Gabriel, I was almost not surprised by his appearance. There were dark circles under his eyes, his skin looked pale and tired, his hair was tousled, and he looked like he was still wearing yesterday's clothes, in which he probably fell asleep somewhere on someone's couch. His usually smoothed appearance, carefully chosen like the facade of a well-planned building, was now crumbling, and this made him not only vulnerable, but also real for the first time in my eyes. "Mrs. Marani," he said, his accent becoming more pronounced, the French melody creeping into every word, as if he could no longer restrain his intonation from fatigue. "May I come in?" I silently stepped back, allowing him to pass, and he walked into my living room, standing in the middle of the room like a man who has lost his bearings, not knowing where to put himself, what to say, where to put his feet safely. "Do you want something to drink?" I asked, not out of a sense of hospitality, but rather out of habit, the one that doesn't wear off even after cheating. He shook his head. "No, thanks. I won't be long." "Did Sylvia send you?" I asked, feeling the icy directness creep into my voice. "No," he shook his head and ran a hand over his face. "She doesn't know I'm here. If I found out, I'd be furious." That surprised me. Gabriel always seemed to me the kind of man who obeys my daughter's will with tacit consent. There was something comfortable for both of them, something safe, albeit short-lived. "Then why are you here?" I asked. He inhaled slowly and deeply, as if before jumping, and I gestured to the couch. We both sat down, leaving a space between us that had previously been filled only with distrust. "A letter," he began. "That's what you got. Sylvia didn't write it." I raised an eyebrow, not believing, or rather, not wanting to believe that he was going to take the blame on himself. "No, no, I wrote it," he said, holding my gaze. "Sylvia. She said she couldn't do it on her own. She asked me to figure it out." I stared at him in silence as the familiar mixture of pain and anger grew inside. Not only did she decide to expel me, but she also didn't have the courage to say it personally, entrusting the most painful conversation to a person I'd never truly accepted. "You agreed. You took it upon yourself to turn me down, knowing who I am to you." I should have refused, he said, lowering his eyes. But then there was so much tension, arguments, pressure, wedding chaos. That's not an excuse, I know. But you did a mean thing. And you know it, I said, not raising my voice, but making it clear that there was no more room for softness. He nodded, steepling his fingers. The thing is, Mrs. Morani, my mother. She's always been a complicated woman. Controlling. Traditional. When she found out how much you were investing in the wedding, she was scared. I decided that you would try to control everything, do everything your own way. She convinced her father that you would put them on the background of your capabilities, that you would turn the ceremony into an American show devoid of respect for French traditions. I laughed, but the sound of my laughter was harsh, almost painful, like a metallic tinkle. How funny. I've never interfered with the planning. I just paid for everything. I know, he sounded guilty. But my parents threatened to withdraw their part of the funds. Sylvia was scared. She wanted them to accept her so much. She didn't choose you. And you let me, I said. Yes, he admitted. And now everything is falling apart. The venue is gone. The catering refused. My parents refused to come for something impromptu. They returned to France. They said that the wedding was cancelled indefinitely. How unfortunate for you, I replied, and my voice, despite its outward calm, was filled with such cold irony that he flinched. I didn't come to ask for money, he said quickly. Then why are you here, Gabriel? What do you want from me? He looked at me, and I saw how he was trying to find words, how he was struggling internally, choosing not banal apologies, but something that at least sounded like the truth. I want to fix everything. He said it almost in a whisper. I stared at him for a long time, without haste, studying, and for the first time I realized that this was a person, not a painting, not a template, not a set of characteristics. Gabriel, despite his outward well-being, with his elegance, poise, and profession in international banking, looked like a boy who had lost his bearings. His shoulders were slumped, his hands were clenched, and his gaze was confused. The confidence with which he usually held himself melted away. And yet, there was something about him that I could respect. Not for my actions, but for coming. 1. Without Sylvia's orders. No ultimatums. Belatedly, but of his own free will. You can't fix this, I finally said, slowly and clearly, letting every word fall between us like a stone into water, not expecting him to be outraged, not hoping that he would argue, because the truth had already been spoken, and it was impossible to change it. No apologies, no explanations. Some things, once broken, stay broken. He nodded, not trying to object, and stood up, straightening his shoulders with difficulty, as if each of his joints had become heavier from the weight he carried with him. But I needed you to know the truth, he said, and despite the fact that his eyes were tired, they remained open and straight. Sylvia loves you. She was simply caught between an impossible choice. No, Gabriel, I replied, not looking away. She made a choice. And it wasn't me. He nodded again, and there was that tiredness in his face that comes not only from lack of sleep, but also from realizing his own mistakes. He stopped at the door and turned around. What are you going to do now? He asked. That, I said, repeating her own words, is up to me. He nodded a third time, and I closed the door behind him without regret. I returned to the kitchen, put water on the stove, chopped tomatoes and garlic, added a little olive oil to the pan, and all this simple routine, the movement of the knife, the quiet hiss on the fire, the smell of basil, had a calming effect. I had cooked this dish, pasta with pomodoro sauce, 100 times already, and that was the consolation, in the repeatability, in the familiar taste, in the fact that it would not betray. I was having dinner alone, at my old oak kitchen table, listening to the silence of the house where children used to laugh, and thinking about what Gabriel had said. Control. That's what it was about. That I could supposedly undermine someone's authority just by being present. About how Sylvia tried to please, built in, lost herself in order to fit into the image adopted by someone else's family. About how Gabriel's mother saw me as a threat to attention, order, and authority. But most of all, I was thinking about myself. About that woman who a week ago, if it were in another life, would have swallowed humiliation, written a check and sat in front of the screen to watch her daughter get married alone. All in the name of peace. In the name of unconditional love. In the name of the peace she always tried to keep. But that life is over. The phone rang again. Sylvia is on the screen. I picked up the phone. "Mom," she said at once, her voice trembling with tears, anger, and humiliation. "Gabriel's parents are going to France. They tell everyone that the wedding is cancelled because of a family drama. Do you even realize how humiliating this is for me? It's almost as humiliating as being told to watch your daughter's wedding on Google Earth," I replied. "It was a joke," she blurted out. "It's a stupid joke. I shouldn't have said that." I was stressed out. "God, Mom, are you really going to punish me forever for one letter?" "It wasn't just a letter, Sylvia," I said calmly. "It was a choice. You chose them. Not me. That's not fair. I was just trying to make everyone happy." "Everyone but me," I reminded her. "What do you want from me? Rude apologies? What is it?" She exclaimed. "Great. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I hurt you. I'm sorry that I couldn't stand up to Gabriel's mother. I'm sorry for everything. Is that enough? Will you help us now?" Those were words that would have brought me to tears before. A week ago, I would have burst into tears. I would have believed it. But now everything has changed. Something in my internal structure, at its very core, has been rebuilt. I didn't just get harder, I changed the very model I was living by. "No," I said softly. "It's not enough." "What?" There was genuine surprise in her voice. But I apologized. "What more do you need? I want you to understand what you've done. I didn't just apologize because you need something from me again. I understand. Mom, please. We can still fix everything. We'll find a new place. We'll reschedule it. You can be there. On the first row. Please help us." I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. This fatigue was not physical, but mental, as after a long, difficult journey. "Goodbye, Sylvia." "Wait, don't hang up." "Mom, I'm begging you." But I've already completed the call. The phone immediately rang again. This time it's Durant. Before I could say a word, he hissed, "Have you completely lost your mind?" "Good evening to you, too, Durant." "It's not funny, Mom. This is serious. Sylvia is hysterical. The wedding has been cancelled. Gabriel's parents have already spread the rumor that our family is just a circus." "Is that so?" I asked. "Or is it just a failed $80,000 party?" "You don't understand. It's her wedding, the most important day of her life, and you're ruining everything because of your feelings." "No, Durant," I said calmly but harshly. "I just stopped letting others trample on mine." "My feelings weren't just hurt, Durant," I said then, clearly, firmly, without trembling in my voice, because I finally realized how important it is to call a spade, even if they hurt, even if they make me uncomfortable. I was deliberately excluded from an important family event, for which I had to allocate a significant amount of money. It's not a matter of feelings. It's a matter of boundaries. There is a difference. So what is the essence of the principle? He did not give up. Are you ready to ruin your relationship with your daughter because of stubbornness? I thought about it, not to answer him, but to answer myself. "Yes," I finally said. "I'm ready. Because if I don't stand up for myself now, when will I? How many more times will I allow myself to be treated like a cash cow that is only approached when help is needed? How many more times will I have to bend to the expectations of others, forgetting about my own needs?" There was silence on the other end, not the kind in which irritation is brewing, but the silence of reflection, heavy, almost reverent. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. There was no more accusation in it, just caution and maybe a little confusion. "I've never heard you speak like that, for real." "No, I haven't," I agreed. Because for most of my life, I was exactly what was expected of me, an infinitely understanding mother, a submissive wife even after a divorce, a patient office manager who always stayed the longest and never asked for thanks. But that's it now. This role no longer belongs to me. And now what? What is it? He asked after a pause. Are you going to just cut us out of your life? Financially and emotionally? I don't know yet, I said honestly. But no matter what happens, everything will be on my terms. Not on Sylvia's terms. Not on the terms of Gabriel's family. And certainly not yours. Only on mine. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my kitchen, listening to the sounds that had once been the backdrop to my life, but now seemed to become louder, clearer, the hum of the refrigerator, the steady ticking of the old wall clock, the distant barking of a neighbor's dog. I realized how many years I had been filling this space, not only physically, but also internally, with the expectations, needs, and requests of others, leaving almost nothing for myself. But now everything has changed. Now I'm learning to be myself in silence, not in the noise of other people's demands. 3 days have passed. 3 days of silence. Not from Sylvia, not from Durrant, not a call, not a message, not a letter. And the silence was strange, both relief and pain, proof that when I stopped being useful, it was as if I had been turned off from their world. I told Robert about this over lunch, when we were discussing the weekly schedule. He listened with narrowed eyes, and then said, "They're regrouping." What? They are planning the next step. My ex did the same thing, the silence before the storm. Then there was a nuclear strike. I chuckled. And what was her nuclear strike? Oh, it's always the same, call for reinforcements. Family. Friends. Anyone who can change your mind or make you doubt yourself. He smiled. Get ready. As if on cue, my phone rang. On the screen is a name I haven't seen in years, Bella Marani. My ex-mother-in-law. I stared at the screen, feeling everything inside freeze. Then she clicked reject. Let's talk about the devil, I muttered. Reinforcements? Robert asked, raising an eyebrow. My ex-husband's mother. We haven't spoken since Durrant graduated from college. 8 years old. So they're digging deep. So they were really desperate. I nodded, trying to ignore the sudden heaviness in my stomach, like a harbinger of a storm. Desperate people do desperate things, and it looks like my family was preparing for a siege. And indeed, when I returned home in the evening, my voicemail was overflowing. 3 messages from Bella, each more emotional than the previous one. In the first, concern. In the second, pleading. In the third, almost an order. It was followed by calls from my sister, whom they obviously also connected, and even from my cousin from Florence, with whom we usually limited ourselves to Christmas cards. The next morning, Saturday, wearing an old straw hat and faded gloves, I was digging in the garden, among the beds of rosemary and sage, weeding, when I heard a car slowly pull up to the house, a smooth, dull engine growl, well known, like a voice from the past. I straightened up, brushing off my hands, and saw an elegant black BMW, sparkling in the morning sun, despite the dust. The car that I once helped choose, comparing it with others, running my finger over the glossy hoods in a car dealership when we were still husband and wife. Gaston came out of it, my ex-husband, the father of my children, the man who packed up and went to his dental hygienist 15 years ago, leaving me with children, a mortgage, and the need to explain to the world that I don't fall apart, even when I'm bursting at the seams. He looked almost the same as he did then, a little more gray at the temples, a little tighter at the waist, but still wore the same confidence characteristic of those men who rarely had to face the real consequences of their actions. He walked with the same expression on his face, a mixture of slight awkwardness and arrogance, and as he approached, he smiled tightly. "Alessia," he said, as if my name was on his tongue every day. "You look good." I took off my gloves, letting the dust settle on my palms, and straightened to my full height. What are you doing here, Gaston? Can't an ex-husband visit the mother of his children, especially when the children are very worried? He said, in a voice in which there was a subtle, barely perceptible falsehood. Stop it, I said. Sylvia sent you. He tried to look surprised, but he had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. She's worried. We're all worried. That's not like you, Alessia. No, I agreed. It doesn't look like it. That's the point. He frowned, as if he didn't expect me to agree with his words. May I come in? It's a little hot in here. I hesitated. An inner voice demanded to refuse, to put an end to it, to close the door behind him, as he once closed it behind our family. But then I decided it was better to listen and get it over with. In the kitchen, I put 2 glasses of iced tea on the table, a gesture developed over the years of marriage that does not resonate in the heart, but lives in the hands. He took the glass, sipped, and grimaced slightly. Still not sweet enough for you? I asked, remembering his southern taste for tea, which resembled syrup. It's all right, he said, and immediately got to the point. Listen, Alessia. Sylvia says you've put her in a pretty difficult position. Something about canceling the transfer of money for the wedding, and she told you that? I asked. Did she also tell you why? He shifted in his chair. She mentioned that you were upset that you would not be able to attend the ceremony in person. But, Alessia, this is not a reason to ruin your relationship with your daughter. I'm not destroying anything, Gaston. I just refused to pay for a wedding that I wasn't invited to. Not invited? Sylvia said that you were always on, just in a different way. I laughed. It was a short, dry laugh, an echo of weariness, not mirth. Is that how she presented it? That I was turned on in a different way? Creative. Very. In fact, she got her fiancé to text me that I could watch my daughter's wedding on Google Earth if I wanted to be a part of it. This is not an invitation, Gaston. It's a humiliation. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but he couldn't find the words. For the first time in our long, complicated history, he seemed truly lost. That's not what she told me, he finally muttered. Shocked, I replied tartly. He fell silent, staring into his glass, and then, as if hoping that all was not lost, he spoke again. But this is her wedding, Alessia. Couldn't you just let it all go? For her sake. Let her go? I asked again. How did I let you go when you went to Jessica? Or when you moved to Florida and saw the kids a couple of times a year? Or when I forgot to pay alimony for 3 months in a row? Then I let it all go because I had no choice. I had to raise 2 children, work 2 jobs, and keep a roof over my head. But right now, Gaston, I have a choice. And I choose not to be treated like a dumb ATM anymore. He looked up, and there was no anger in his eyes, but rather something like realization. So it's about money after all? He asked. No, I said calmly. It's about dignity. About the boundaries. About finally stopping accepting crumbs of attention and starting demanding what I deserve. He was silent for a long time, studying me with his eyes, as if he had really seen me for the first time. You've changed, he said finally. Yes, I answered simply. It has changed. After Gaston left, after his car disappeared into the twilight, leaving behind a barely perceptible smell of exhaust and past years, I returned to my business in the garden, digging my hands into the warm earth, as if by touching the soil I could cling to myself, real, stable, not wavering from every other word. I annoyed the monarch along the path, straightened the curb lines, cut the grass, and as the sun was setting, I finally got to the garage, the one that had been storing boxes, old tools, broken chairs, and suitcases with things that no one had intended to use for decades. I took them out one at a time, sorting, throwing them away, freeing up space, not only physically, but also internally. It was only when she was done that she allowed herself a shower, a cup of strong tea, and silence, which was again broken by the doorbell. This time it was Sylvia who stood in the doorway. Disheveled, tired, with eyes that shone not only with fear, but also with stubborn anger. I could read the familiar mixture of despair and accusation in her pose from childhood, the way she stood in the doorway of her room when she shouted that I was always on Durant's side, and she also crashed into the kitchen if she didn't get permission to go to a sleepover. "You turned my father against me," she blurted out as soon as I opened the door. "He called me and read me your entire monologue about how much of a liar I am." I silently stepped back, letting her pass, knowing that neither I nor my neighbors could stand the scene on the porch. "I just told him the truth," I replied, calmly. "Your version. The electronic version. Full of emotions and exaggerations." I specified it. "The one where you told me that I could watch your wedding on Google Earth," I continued. "It was a joke." "Stupid, yes. But you ruined everything because of her." Her voice broke. I looked at her the way one looks not at a daughter, not at an enemy, but at a person who stands on the edge of awareness, but has not yet decided to take a step forward. "Do you really think so?" I asked. "That everything was ruined just because I didn't want to be used again? That everything was fine until I said enough is enough?" "Well, how else? Everything was going well until you were afraid of losing control and withdrew the money," she said stubbornly. "No, Sylvia. Everything wasn't going well. You lied to me. You let me believe that I was invited, while behind my back you were discussing how to get rid of my presence at the ceremony. You took my money, treating me like a burden. It's not a concern. This is the usage." She looked away. His eyes darted to the side, glided over the shelves, over the framed photograph, over the kettle on the stove. "That's not true," she whispered. "It's true," I said softly but clearly. "And you know it." She sat down on the couch, as if she suddenly turned out to be not the grown woman who planned the wedding, but the little girl with scratched knees who came to me for comfort and expected me to find a way to fix everything. "What now? What is it?" she asked. "The wedding is off. Gabriel's parents turned their backs on him. Durant is angry. Dad is disappointed. And I'm alone." I sat across from him, not approaching, not closing the distance, either physically or emotionally. "It's not a punishment. These are the consequences. You're an adult. You chose. Now you're living with it. Will you let me suffer?" Her voice trembled. "What about unconditional love?" "I love you, Sylvia. Always. Without conditions. But love doesn't mean that I have to close my eyes when I'm being used. This does not mean that I have to pay for my own humiliation. Love is not submission." "I didn't reject you," she whispered. "You excluded me from the most important day of your life and expected me to pay for it. That's rejection, Sylvia." She wiped her eyes. "I made a mistake. Terrible. I understand it. But you're my mother. You have to forgive me." "Maybe," I said. "But forgiveness is not a return to the old rules. This is not an erasure of the past. It's an opportunity to build something new. No lies. Without using it. With respect. If you're ready for it." She stared at me as if she didn't know who I was. I did not know this woman, who no longer bent, did not ask, did not sacrifice herself automatically. "I'm not sure I can," she whispered. "Then it's your choice," I said. "Just like mine is to be true to yourself." After she left, I sat in silence for a long time, feeling everything that had been stacked and shelved for decades shudder inside me. I didn't ruin the wedding. I destroyed the pattern, the scheme, the model in which my place was always at the stove, at the cash register, in the shade. I chose myself. Not a convenience. Not the world. Not a performance. The next morning, on Monday, I called a travel agency and booked a trip to Italy, the trip I'd been dreaming about since I was 38, but I'd been putting it off for later. And then it was always someone else's. Then I dialed Robert's number. "Did you have dinner on the weekend?" I asked. "No, why?" Would you like to have dinner with me? Not as a colleague. Like a man with a woman. He laughed. Finally, he said. And I smiled. When I was standing at the stove cooking pasta with garlic and rosemary, Durant called. Mom, he said. There was caution and surprise in his voice. Sylvia told me what you were talking about. What did you say? And I think I'm starting to understand why it was important to you. Do you understand? I asked. Yes. I thought, how many times have you put us first? And how we thought it was due. I was silent. I'm sorry, he said. That I hadn't seen it before. That he took you for granted. That wasn't all. But it was a start. Thank you, I said softly. And now? He asked. I looked around, the kitchen, the evening, the scent of dinner. Everything was mine. Now we are all learning to live with our choices. And with their consequences. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.